I'll do a brief intro into what everybody's looking at, and then Teresa and the other business managers, if you want to talk about the language changes that the JOC wouldn't have seen before today, I'll turn it over to you. And I don't, Teresa, can you throw up, do you have the most recent version that Tracy just talked about?
I have it if you want it up.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so scroll down to the first page. Not that it matters much, but I added the word "and" to make the whereas paragraph match what it's supposed to with the rest of the whereas paragraphs. That's a new change. Scroll down. The main, the changes we talked about, you can keep going till you see the next redlining. These were all part of the changes that were made in the first go round. Nothing has changed for this meeting from the last go round. Go ahead. This has just a correction of a typo, but this language also is exactly the same as it was from the last go round.
Okay, can we talk about this for a moment? I was under the impression that the treasurer had to be elected in June or July or May, whatever it is. I thought that was a state requirement that the treasurer was elected at the fiscal year. Am I wrong?
I think I looked this up when we were talking about the change, because I also thought that was the case. And in fact, it doesn't specify for the tech school, it doesn't specify what that year needs to look like.
So
but I'll double check.
So I think what the point of this this language
point,
was
Megan, it's just whether, I mean, I don't have a problem with the change. It's unnecessary in my mind, but if it's a state rule or regulation or whatever you want to call it, then I don't know that we can change it.
So Jim, just to be clear, we're not actually changing anything. The point of this language was to make it match what we actually do.
But that's not Jim's point. Jim's point, like, if what we're actually doing is inconsistent with what the school code requires, we should stop actually doing it and leave the language the same. And I remember actually when this came up, I'm trying to look it up on Westlaw right now, that I had to look up whether in fact the school code dictates the term of the officers for the tech school. And my memory is the answer is no, it does not. So you can do what you want in terms of the terms for those officers.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have any problem with changing it. The point was just to make it match, and that's what people didn't want to change any rotations, but I don't, I think it was just to try to make those three offices line up and make it simpler. And I know David had looked into it sooner, or, back when we made this match.
I will continue looking for the school code language to confirm, and then if you want to keep scrolling. Okay, so this is new language. And the first part was just to clarify that because we're changing the way, capital projects would be funded, to the extent there's existing, and I'm not sure, and actually any of the business managers who want to chime in even on this part of the discussion, feel free. I'm not sure that lease debt in this sense, whether or not that's a term of art, but just to be on the safe side, we made it clear that to the extent lease debt covers existing capital debt, that the old language about how that gets paid back would stay in effect for any debt existing as of today.
So is most of the lease debt like those copiers, that contract you have with that company that does the photocopiers and stuff like that, Teresa, or is that really the only lease debt that the school has?
Yes, that is the only lease debt right now, but I think we were kind of thinking that that was part of the bond payments.
And I think so too, which is why, and I should know the answer, but I don't. I don't know if lease debt is a term of art in this regard. The reason I think it's limited to the building project is because you'll see in that first line, there's a reference to the technical school authority, which was the entity responsible for actually building the property, as opposed to the technical school, which holds the leases for things like copiers. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Does to me.
Well, so are you saying, is it better to just say all debt?
Well, no, no, because any given year you'll have debt, including something like your copier lease, right? But the copier lease is going to get paid by the districts not using that step formula. So this paragraph 8, I read, and I think the business managers all agree, as applying to capital debt. But I'm not sure why the phrase lease debt is used.
And that was we just wanted to make sure what was going on right now was in place. It was going to keep going forward for any debt that was, as of right now. And then at the bottom, there's that section down there. It says anything that would happen after July 1st, 2021, then we would go through the ADMs. So we just wanted to be very clear, in case any of us come or go, that everybody's aware of exactly what that paragraph meant.
So would it help to say all outstanding capital lease debt payable to the Upper Bucks County Technical School Authority for debt in place prior to July 1st, 2021?
I
Does
think
that
that
make it clear
just
enough?
that little piece that we put in makes it very clear, at least on the business manager side. I think we all understand that that means debt that's already being paid with the bond prior to keeps going through the step value. Anything that would come out after that would go through the ADM formula.
Now, little technical thing, I think the tech school authority has not been convened since the original one. So I don't know why it's even in there, because, that was there from the original. It's a borrower.
When was the school actually built?
68, 65, 66?
So let's see.
264.
So the odds are better than not that the technical school authority charter has lapsed.
Yeah, I would think so.
I think typically it's a 50-year charter and it does need to be renewed. So assuming it was the early 60s, it's come and gone.
Yeah, I would, because we didn't use the authority to any other borrowings. It was all went through the school districts.
So let me ask a stupid question. Well, that you'd think I'd know, considering this was the heart of some of the amendments we were talking about. Sitting here today, I know Palisades paid in cash on the last project anyway, but are Quakertown and Penn Ridge making bond payments?
Yes.
Okay. So
So this is really just for those outstanding bond payments.
correct.
You could even be specific about what bond payments they are.
And we should probably remove the reference to the authority, because I don't think the authority is involved in this most current bond
It is.
payment, right?
It is not.
Yeah, okay. So why don't we change the whole name of this to debt incurred through bond financing,
That's fine.
and then change that second reference to lease debt to the same phrase, debt incurred through bond financing payable, and then get rid of the authority. Just the word authority.
Okay.
I like that better.
All right, and actually, I don't know who I'm telling to make these changes because Tracy's busy keeping minutes. I will tell you, I'm making this change on the version. I have the same version on my system, and I will make a change in the version I have.
Okay. And then you can just send the updated version to us after the meeting.
Yes.
I don't need that. If you're just talking about bonds, I still have the feeling, the thoughts that the bonds should be paid on real estate value and not the ADMs because of the stability of the real estate values as opposed to the ADMs.
I mean, Jim, you guys don't even take out any bond debt anyway. You guys don't have any. So it really doesn't apply to you.
Just trying to make it easier for down the road. If we don't need to change something and complicate it, I don't think we need to change it, make things complicated. That's just the way I am.
Understood.
Now, this does kick in here when later on it says the stead value shall be used for, what is it, the 600s, 400s, Teresa? Any kind of capital?
No,
item?
all of that, I believe all of that was going to just run through the ADMs now.
Well, that's my, okay. So this, at least that part could be separate from that, and it could run through the step.
I mean, I really think that this 0.8 here is mainly just to take care of the debt prior to July 1st, 2021. So it's going to essentially expire once that debt has been paid off, correct?
Yes. But so just,
No.
and then any debt incurred after July 1st, 2021 would be apportioned to the sending districts based on ADM.
No. 5-year average, okay.
I mean, Jim, I can also tell you, you guys don't have any debt in our debt's going to be dropping off, and we're going to be debt free pretty quickly. I don't see that being an issue in the future anyway, because we wouldn't be borrowing money the same way that we did in the past. And if we did, it certainly wouldn't be, it doesn't make sense to be borrowing it through the tech school the way it was done last time. I think,
Not let you do it.
I didn't do it. I wouldn't do it. If you ask me why they did it, I think it was so that it was a way of hiding debt in a different place so that it wasn't as apparent to the community that they were borrowing their money, if you ask me.
There was no hiding.
You asked me, you guys didn't, Palisades paid in cash.
Yeah, because
So,
Quakertown, well, I don't know.
As we back slowly into the bushes when you guys talk about no debt,
Yeah.
hiding.
I thought you guys were pretty tough, Chris.
I guess Zach could probably answer that, but I believe our debt is pretty high currently.
I question whether Penn Ridge can pay their debt off in the next 10 years. Because they just put
Jim, you're cutting out. I can't hear you.
did major renovations in the last 5 years, and typically they're. I question your statement that Penn Ridge is going to be debt-free. That's pretty tough. Seeing the tax situation and the fact that you guys did major renovations to the high school and a couple middle schools, took out a lot of big bonds, and they've got to be at least 20-year-old bonds. So just what I'm thinking.
Well, I invite you to attend our finance committee meeting if you're interested, but David, do you want to, was there another change, I think, that came out of the discussion with the business administrators?
You're still muted, Dave.
Yes, please, Tracy, if you don't mind, keep scrolling. This was a relatively minor issue, just cleaning up kind of the switch from STEB to ADM funding. So you'll see in blue, we, just to be super clear, added effective July 1 again. And then I don't computed at the end of the school year. I'm not sure why we're striking that, because it's inconsistent with the 5-year average thing.
So we're just going to go with the 5-year average. Tracy, if you could just scroll down a little bit more.
The stuff in red is the original change language, and then if you
Yeah,
keep scrolling, Tracy, there will be another section in blue. Here we go.
yeah. So basically, we're just striking that whole recalculation out to follow what we're doing now.
So just to clarify, the language didn't really even match what we were doing currently, right? So even, there's significant errors throughout this document that if we don't do some kind of modification, we're going to continue to have things that don't even say what we've been doing, let alone changing them to, what people prefer to do in the future.
Yeah, so that basically is because we do a 5-year average of everything. So instead of recalculating at the end of the year, like it's already averaged. So
Run me through that, the striking of the blue language and what's left there. Calculation of the actual share of everything shall be determined. So upon the completion of the annual local auditor's report.
So it suggests the calculation is being done every year based on that year's or the prior year's ADM. But the practice for some time with everything has been to do the 5-year ADM average.
Okay, I think that could be a problem.
well, so like if there's a overage or a shortfall, like last year there was a $600 and some thousand shortfall, that was actually then built into the budget for the next year. So in 18-19 there was a shortfall that got brought forward into the 19-20 budget, and then this year 19-20 I think it was about $26,000 shortfall, so that'll get built into the next budget that we're working on. So that's kind of how we've been doing it. So there is no other calculation at the end of the year. We're just building it into the following year's budget. And then that kind of gives everybody a chance to budget appropriately for those, shortfalls or overages, because then you'll know it'll kind of even out instead of making peaks. And
Are they 12, when you say the payments are due each month, are they 12 semi-similar payments throughout the month? Is that how you disperse the?
It's, well, when the sending districts pay, yes, it's 12 equal payments throughout the school year.
Okay.
Okay, so as an aside, well, another thought here for the result of this is that the tech school will have a basic fund balance of, I think we should call it 8%. Yes, and that if they want to do any big project where it would take more than what the 8% is, it's going to have to be approved by the annual budget. I'm thinking of the roofs.
Well, so we really don't have anything, I don't think, written in there so much for, I guess, like the roofs in the, like I haven't budgeted for the next year with the roofs in there. So yes, we'll have to figure out if the money's going to stay in the tech school, then if the fund balance can be more than the 8%, or if you guys will hold it back at your own schools and send it over. So that is something that has to kind of.
So that's something that we had decided not to put into the articles of agreement, because then every time you do something different than that, you would have to change it, and you'd have to get all 3 sending districts to vote on an exception to be able to do that. And there's differences of opinion on whether or not the fund balance should be carried in the JOC, whether or not it should be carried at the sending districts. We pulled from that for the project last year, and I think that that's a discussion that we're going to have to figure out going forward, but it's not something that needs to be in the Articles of Agreement.
Well,
The other thing I was going to mention too is with this site logic report when it comes back, and under the current model we're on now, would everything that they bring up and every project that we do then be considered a capital project if it's part of that engineering firm's recommendation of what should be dealt with? I mean, Teresa, would you put all of those items into the 400s or no?
No, would depend on what it was.
But it also depends on whether or not you're going by how the formula has been utilized, or how it's written. And so there's a difference between the practice and what the formula, what the Articles of Agreement actually says, because of different interpretations.
well, I think what
That's
we're trying
part
to
of the
do here
point of
now
clarifying all of
is clear
this.
that up.
What's that?
I think what we're trying to do here now is to clear that up. If it's all those 400s,
Well,
And-
we are, Jim, we're clearing it up by making it all go under one formula, and then it doesn't matter. Hold on a second.
it does matter in that if any of those things that come back are a capital project, you're either going to have to budget for the whole thing annually, which is, I guess, what you're talking about doing, or you can spread it out. Or you can allow the tech school to build up a dedicated fund of some sort to cover those things.
But Jim, you can't carry money in fund balance that is from the 5-year rolling ADM and then pull that money out to use it for capital projects based on this, because this suggests that you'd be using a completely different funding formula, which is the issue that we had when we just tried to do that for that other renovation project. And again, you were arguing in the meeting at Palisades that this formula doesn't apply to all of those capital projects because you guys have never used it for that, but that's not what this says. And so there's what this says, there's what everybody's been doing that's different from that, and then there's what's being proposed. And there's no clear understanding of where that line is from one formula to the other. There's different opinions on which should go under which formula. And Teresa's been in a position where she's got to budget the 400s category essentially into two different formulas based on the current practice, which has really just been for renovations and additions to use that formula.
But according to the prior paragraphs, we don't have separate formulas. Everything's up on the ADMs, right?
No, Jim, what's currently on there in the articles that has been struck up there in red says that if it was in the function 4000s, it would be with the step.
Well, we're taking that out, right?
Yes.
Okay,
That's going to be
so
removed.
that falls back to any ADM calculation.
Correct. So if the roof has to be done, then it would be based on ADMs at this point. It would be built into the budget and based on ADMs.
And then there would be no discussion on whether or not, this should be something that should be in the 4000s or something that's maintenance. Really to the districts, it's going to appear the same. The districts are going to have the same ADM for all funding. So at least those arguments won't ever come up. Where, like a large air conditioning unit on a building, could cost $100,000. Would that argument come up then? Should that be a capital project that doesn't go through ADM before? Whereas now it won't matter. It's all going to go through the same. The only thing, Teresa just has to organize them so it's right on her audits, basically.
Yes, I agree with that. My question is, at the home schools, for other than land or major building things where we have to take out bonds, we at Palisades try to put in a dedicated fund monies to cover those things over a period of a year. And when it builds up to enough, so that we have enough, a large amount, not a big, real large amount, but we have an amount that we can use on those kinds of projects without going out and borrowing money, without having to go through a whole formula calculation as to who pays what.
So we're going to have that study done by SiteLogic. So we're going to be able to have a much better picture of what's coming up in the tech school than we've had in the past. So as long as we can sort of estimate what our ADM is going to be, I don't think there haven't been really too many wild swings in that.
Okay, so
Either.
you're going to have to, we are going to have to, at the home schools, be aware of them and budget for them on our Palisades. We have a capital budget that we use to fund for these things. So at the home schools, we're going to have to budget for that. Is that what you're saying?
Budget for every project at the tech
Any
school.
project.
I mean, but once we see this report, we're going to have a better idea of what projects could be coming in the horizon. Yes.
Yes, so we're going to have to plan for them at the home schools to do that, correct?
Well, unless you're Quakertown and just borrow the money, but no. Yes, you would have to. It's if you're funding it, I believe through a capital fund that you guys set up, you would probably want to do that.
Yes, I agree with that. It's just so everybody's aware of that.
And I think what Jim's trying to say then is with difference with the ADMs, there might be, and unfortunately Quakertown's really the one that's going to see the increase, because just looking at ADM to STEB value right now is a 16.4% increase. So just be aware that's how much, more that you would be paying between the difference of the formulas when those projects come through.
Can anyone hear me? Is this thing working?
You're very, very, very quiet.
For me, so
Now you're better.
now I can barely hear you, but you guys can hear me. So Jim, we can easily start a fund to pay for things at the tech school for projects that are coming down the line when we go over those. But the problem right now is that would have to be done with two completely different formulas depending on which project. Is it for air conditioning? Then that would go into one formula. Is it a renovation or addition? Then that would go into another one. Unless you're going by the wording that's in here that's never actually been used, and then it would go all into one with that capital funding formula, which is even different than you've been arguing about it only being used for things like debt. So that's the point, is this whole thing is a chaotic mess. It's a nightmare for Teresa to be budgeting different 400s in different categories. It makes sense to make it through one funding formula, and then if we want to budget and put in extra money, we can put money into a capital fund for projects that are coming down the line, but we can do that with the 5-year ADM instead of doing that with the STEB formula.
Except that you have language in here now in the change, and it's okay, that there'll be a reconciliation after the audit is done, and then anything, and we're talking actual numbers, not budgeted numbers on the reconciliation, any funds over, in other words, if they save money at the tech school, that has to go towards what the school districts pay for the next budget. I think we're complicating things. So there
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. Can you repeat what you were saying, Jim?
Fund balance to build up. If that's the way it's written.
If you're using all one formula, then there's no obligation.
I don't care about the formula. The language in there says that we have proposed to change it to that the reconciliation on the audited numbers, actual numbers, will occur every year. And that any difference between the actual numbers and the budgeted numbers gets carried into the next budget. So there's no opportunity.
The language was clarified to match what we're already doing.
I don't care what we're already doing. You're trying to change things.
I
We
think you
wanna
guys are actually talking about two slightly different issues. And Jim, it took me a minute or two to catch up to where you are. You're not actually talking about the blue language. You're talking about the last red paragraph at the top here. And I think, right? You're saying that basically this new change means that for future project purposes, every year we're essentially giving back any extra money if a sending district overpaid.
That's
And so
correct.
there's no way to actually build up a fund balance.
It seems to me, yes.
Right. And that's an excellent point. I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't thought of it in that way. I don't think it limits, I don't think the Articles of Agreement actually then limits what each sending district elects to do with the subsequent year's budget. So I don't think it prohibits the sending district from saying, and you can, and as you pointed out, there are two ways to handle it. And the JOC can make the call and the sending districts can make the call. Future budgeting purposes, do we want to build up a reserve fund, maybe past 8% at the tech school? Or do the sending districts individually want to, fund it in their own way when the time comes? So just, pay the bill any way each sending district wants to. I don't think this will prohibit you from having that conversation about the next year's budget. But I hadn't thought of it until you raised it. I understand what you're saying.
Okay. All right. Well, if that's the way it is, that sounds all right to me.
And Jeff, did you hear anything from SiteLogic on when you're going to get that data from them?
They were at the school last week for a few days, and then I noticed they were outside doing surveys, and then, well, of course, not a storm, so I'm assuming within a couple of days or a week or so. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody from SiteLogic, so when that comes in, it'll be shared with the JOC, and they'll come out with a report.
But before we leave this little section here, I realized that I thought I spotted a typo, and so I didn't even ask Teresa about it. And now I'm worried that it wasn't a typo. So where it says at the end, where it says refunds of overpayment or payment for shortfalls will be incorporated into the budget formula, you originally had a period there and then a new sentence that just read consideration of the amount of fund balance the technical school must maintain as noted in 9A. I had assumed that was a typo, and so eliminated the period and put back with consideration. But then I realized I may not actually know what I'm talking about. So
Okay.
I'm asking if that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Hold on.
No, I think that's how it should be, right? So after the auditor's report, refunds or overpayments for the shortfalls will be incorporated into the budget formula, which is what we're doing, with consideration of the amount of fund balance to the tech school. So that's kind of what Jim's point is. If there's going to be refunds, are we refunding and reducing the amount owed the next year, or is that money going to go into fund balance? Because I think right now it just says an 8% is what the limit is.
Well, that's okay. Hold on.
In 9A, obviously,
Yep,
just
that's
says
what I'm
it right
looking
there.
Yeah, 8%.
Well, okay, so Jim, you have raised a really good point, although it's this section that matters more, because no matter how you're trying to save, do we want to keep the cap at 8% or not? And that's probably a decision the whole JOC has to have. And I don't know that you need to have it today. I don't even know that you have a project where it's going to be relevant in the immediate horizon.
Well, if the language that we're proposing allows for that discussion, I'm fine with it.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because you're right. If the JOC said, you know what, we want to save up for a project 3 years from now, there's a cap on how much they can save. That has nothing to do with the changes we're making. That's the existing articles caps it at 8%.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll save that fight for another day.
Okay.
I thought it was just referring to, I thought it was just referring to how much you're allowed to carry in fund balance, not necessarily funds that are dedicated to capital, right? Wouldn't that be separate?
We don't have a separate capital fund, correct, Teresa?
Right.
No.
There is a little bit, maybe about $100,000 left in the capital fund, Fund 31, I believe it is, from the renovations.
That's
So-
the
But-
bond that are left over.
Right.
But is that Fund 31 in your view? Is that part of the calculation of is that part of the calculation of what is fund balance?
No.
Right, because this
Oh,
is supposed to
okay.
be, this is supposed to be unassigned, and legally, we're not supposed to have more, we're not supposed to have that, which is why the cap is here. But if we did a capital fund, that would be separate from this, because that wouldn't be money that's unassigned.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It would be
But
assigned.
With the 8%.
David, do you know if tech schools are capped at the 8%? I thought I had read somewhere that they didn't have a cap of fund balance, but I could be wrong.
I do not know for sure.
I'm pretty sure the tech schools don't have a cap. It's all the big schools, all the K through 12s. According to their budget, they have a percentage. So 8% of our, of our budget really isn't that much if we're looking for a lot, if we're gonna be doing roofs and major projects, and if there's, God forbid, a catastrophe or something. I don't know, Teresa, what's our balance now? Is that?
I'm thinking it's going to come in around 1.7, which is over the 8%, but that's one to figure out how much the whole ag building is. We have
If we have that cap still in place, wouldn't just assigning some of that to be into a capital account fix that then as well? Essentially,
So
you're just moving it from the fund balance to a capital account. So now it's assigned, it's not unassigned.
That's what we do with the homeschools. But there aren't any other unassigned funds over there at this point at the tech school. Or even assigned, there aren't any assigned other than the capital projects fund, which is pretty restrictive.
Well, for assigned, I have the money in there for the shortage of the budget for this year and then the ag building. So there, we do have some assigned money over there.
Okay, well, if we can make the proposed language work with, to allow for some sort of an assigned fund to be used other than the unassigned 8% cap or no cap, I think we need to do that.
So I think that's what David Kahn was just saying, is that this wouldn't pertain to that. So if we still wanted to set up a separate capital fund, that's something that we can discuss in the future and still do. And this wouldn't prevent us from being able to do that.
But
Okay.
you have a capital fund, so you can keep it.
Wait.
Project.
We could just add money to it. Yeah.
Now, so for the capital fund at a tech school, it's a little bit different. A Fund 30 is different. You have to use that money within 5 years.
Okay.
From my understanding, it's not the same as school districts. So if we were going to do it, it would be better to keep it in the general fund and just set up kind of like a capital project line and section, budget within the general fund, Fund 10.
But the point is that we can assign funds, whether in the general operating budget or in a capital account for a limited period, and that those assigned funds won't count towards the fund balance cap.
If we can do that, yes, I go along with that. As long as we can do that. And I think that's something you need to talk to your auditors about. There may be some disagreement there.
Talk to who about?
The auditors. because they're the ones that decide if we're doing the right thing or not. Okay. Shall we move on?
If you don't mind scrolling down a little bit, Tracy, there's still one last. And the blue language in here is just sort of reiterating the effective date of the proposed changes. And Dr. O'Connell pointed out that the very last phrase was actually arguably ambiguous, like, you know, because everybody theoretically can utilize. So we struck the word eligible. So now it will be allocated among those who actually utilize nutritional services and at any given year.
I think we also discussed too the loss or gains, added the gains part.
I like your aspirational thinking.
It's me. I'm an optimist.
Yeah. And I believe that is it in terms of changes in blue. So stuff that would look different from, you know, the last round of this discussion.
Okay.
Other than, as I mentioned, section 11, you'll see now has no red in it because we eliminated the proposed change to the superintendent of record schedule.
Right. And just to circle back, when I was trying to talk earlier when I couldn't get my sound to work, I think Teresa was saying that this formula change will negatively impact Quakertown the most. And I don't know that that's actually true because our enrollment has surpassed Quakertown's. And so if you look at this year, we would be higher. So you just need the 5-year average to catch up. So in 4 years, it's really going to hit Penridge. And we're also taking the biggest hit on this nutritional services change. So when you look at the fact that we're taking the huge loss on the nutritional services piece, and we're the ones who are surpassing and becoming the highest in enrollment, you know, I think down the line, Penridge is likely to take the biggest hit. But it's fair, and it's a formula that is it's easier, especially in a school as small as this one, to be using one formula instead of 2 formulas. It's fair, it makes sense, you know, and for the reasons we've talked about, I don't think it makes sense for Quakertown to be taking a hit on nutritional services in 2 different places when they're not feeding their kids here. And I don't think that, you know, I think the only district that we know benefits from this is Palisades, which is ironic given the vote count on this. So I guess I just wanted to point out that I don't, you know, this is not something that's going to be some big advantage to Penridge or something. This is about trying to clean up the language and make it fair. So I just wanted to point that out.
And ultimately, even if we go to 50-50, it is still going to cost Quakertown more, you know, once that ADM does pick up. But having this nutritional service thing, this nutritional service part in there certainly helps with that. And again, you know, what I believe is fair, the kids that utilize the school should be the ones or the districts that do should be the ones that pay for it. So that's why I am still pushing it for Quakertown, even though their percentage will go up from this in the beginning.
And I'll just add that the renovations that were done at the tech school, particularly the cafeteria renovations that were done a few years ago, were based on a certain number of students. So it's sized for that number of students. Quakertown paid bond-wise to do that. I don't know that it's, quote, fair that now they can pull out of it and not be responsible for what happens there. But that's me.
Well, to your point though, Jim, doesn't that mean then they paid for a space that they're not utilizing? So doesn't that hurt them? Not.
Well, you can look at it like this, that if they were sending their students, if their Quakertown students were eating at the tech school, they would be paying into the cafeteria fund on an individual student basis, and any, possible loss or revenue gain wouldn't be there shared by Quakertown. So, tomato, tomato. What's, Teresa, how much short was the cafeteria fund this last year?
I don't think this year can really count though.
That's what I said.
I believe Quakertown was like $500,000 short.
I know it. Is the tech school cafeteria reimbursed for type A or lunches from the feds or state? Like we are at the homeschools?
Isn't the USDA reimbursing everybody? That's why I said this year is probably not a good year to look at those numbers. Because is the USDA still reimbursing for every meal? No.
We are getting reimbursed right now. Actually, we've been doing a little bit better with our reimbursements than we would have, I think. So
Yeah, I remember I was surprised the numbers were actually not as bad last year as they've been in prior years.
But we were only in, we were out since March as well.
I would have to pull up the audit and see where we ended for last year. I don't know that off the top of my head.
I guess the question I have, that the homeschools, our cafeteria gets federal reimbursements, I guess, for lunches for people that are poor. That's the wrong wording, but does the tech school get any of that?
Yeah, we do get free and reduced lunch reimbursement. Yes.
Okay. Is that it?
I was trying to find, I know I had the nutritional services numbers for the last few years. I think they were in that PowerPoint that I shared with the sending districts, but I'm trying to pull it up in my email and I haven't been able to pull it up. It might actually be on here.
I have last year's massive budget book in front of me, but
It's in there.
it's not, yeah, I'm sure it's in here, but I'm not gonna.
It's towards the back under dedicated funds. It's for the, what is it, Teresa? Fund 30? Is that?
51, food service.
You don't have the page memorized?
No, I don't, sorry.
There's an index in the front. Oh, I have it too.
Food service fund, page 74.
Food service.
Oh, here we go, I found it.
40 and 41.
2014-15 was negative 60,000. 15-16 was negative 27,000. 16-17 was negative 32,000. 17-18 was a surplus of 120,000, and there was some random reason for that I don't remember. And then 18-19 was 56,000. I don't have 19-20.
It appears, it says net position ending. Is that it? That looks like a positive 7,379. Is that right, Teresa?
Is that after the auditor's entries with all the, hold on.
It says changes in net position.
Does that have the $97,000 in there too?
Yeah. Transfer from general fund. Okay, net position beginning is negative 73322. Yeah.
Have to say goodbye.
Oh.
My granddaughter.
Oh.
Aw. Did you go out and build a snowman with her today?
No, she was at home.
Oh.
So in general, like right now, if the tech school were to say build have $1 million worth of roof projects and do them all at one shot, Quakertown would have to pay an additional $160,000. Now we would assume that these giant projects aren't going to happen every year. So what would offset this bigger increase would be the this food service change that I believe would not balance it out, but make it a little bit more fair. And if all of this is done in the name of fairness, then if Quakertown's not utilizing it and Quakertown is utilizing the rest of the building, then they should be paying their fair share for the rest of the building.
I also think it would still be up for debate about whether or not the roofing goes through that formula or not, because according to the language in the Articles of Agreement, it would, but according to past practice, it wouldn't. So we'd be back to that debate of which formula it's supposed to go under anyway.
I think you've proposed changes.
I think the only things we know go through that formula is that renovation project that we just did, which we had an exception to not go through that formula, and I don't see any major renovation projects. And if we even changed it to just be regarding debt, then no one's taking out debt to do any of these projects either. So it would be a big debate about who's supposed to pay what, I guess is the point.
Well, I think the object here is to make it clear enough so there's no debate.
Right, well, I think that's why putting it under one formula ends the debate.
Okay, and I'm okay with that if that's the way it is. I think we've already been past that point.
All right.
Who's the chair of this meeting? Is that you, Megan?
Yes. So are we good? Is everybody okay with this then? We can move this forward?
I think it needs to go to a JOC meeting with proposed changes and get the full JOC to approve the changes and then send it to the homeschools from there.
Jim, when we go to the board meeting, you want to send it to the committee meeting. When we go to the committee meeting, you want to send it to the board meeting, okay? It doesn't need to go through the meetings 15 times.
We don't need a vote on it.
Not required, as
We don't-
David's probably going to tell you. Go ahead, David.
We don't need a vote on it. However, and I know all of the JOC was invited to tonight's meeting, given the fact, as an informational item, since there are changes that the JOC, there are new changes. So as a purely informational item for the JOC before it goes back to Palisades, it probably makes sense for the JOC to see it. It does not need a JOC vote. You can if you want to, but you don't need to.
But
So
it
our
does
last
need
meeting-
new votes in Quakertown and Penn Ridge as well because it's changed, correct?
That's correct. You're right about that.
So their last meeting, we said that we were going to have an Articles of Agreement meeting to clarify language based on recommendations from the business administrators so that it matches what we currently do. That's exactly what we did. We didn't do other changes than that, correct?
And if that's correct,
Okay.
other than a couple of Scrivener stuff, which I don't care about, but yeah, but nobody else from the JOC is here other than the committee. So yeah, they all know it's in discussion, but none of them have even seen, until today, none of them even saw the document with the proposed change.
Understood. It unanimously passed 2 sending districts and we didn't change any content related issues, but we can send it back around and then we'll send it back to committee again and then we'll send it back to the board again and maybe we'll just
Also, I don't know, who's the president of the board for Palisades this year?
I don't know why it would have to go back to committee again. If the JOC approves on total of the
I don't either, Jim, but we've gone back and forth here about 20 times now, so.
David, what was your question?
I was curious who the president of the board for Palisades is.
Bob Musantri.
Oh, okay. Palisades is going to put it on their agenda when they put it on the agenda anyway. So if it's going to be after the JOC meeting, then we'll make sure the JOC knows about it. So.
David,
But
did you make those changes as we were talking about them then tonight?
Yes.
Okay, so can you send that out to the entire JOC and the administration from the JOC? And then also, I don't know if you have the email addresses for the business administrators. Do you? Can you loop them in?
I know I have Zach and Drew's. I don't know if I have Sean's, but I'll get it.
Okay, well, I can forward it to Sean then.
Okay.
So if you can just make sure it gets to everybody else, and then I'll forward it to Sean, and then our, between Dr. O'Connell and our business administrators, they can also loop in Dr. Bolton and Dr. Harner so that they see the final version of this as well.
You got it. Wait,
All right.
Tracy has her hand raised.
I'm having a little problem here. It sounds like we're trying to do this without any public knowledge.
No, this is a
No.
public meeting. This was announced to the
It is.
public. Any public was
Public
welcome to
meeting.
attend this meeting tonight. And we've presented this publicly numerous times. I don't know why you would suggest that we're trying to hide anything from the public.
Jim, if you wanted,
And they haven't been public.
Jim, and that's why I do think it makes sense for it to at least be an informational item on the JOC agenda. I agree. Yeah, and if you want it as a voting item, you're not going to get in trouble for voting on something you don't need to vote on. That's fine. You can do it,
Right.
but you don't need to.
Okay, I just think, I think it ought to be presented to the full JOC for discussion, however, and then I'm assuming basically because I'm in favor of the changes that were proposed, that there won't be too much issue, that there won't be a negative response to the proposal to move it forward.
Okay.
That's what the committees are supposed to do. Committees are supposed to hash them out until we get consensus. And consensus is not a vote, it's a consensus where one person or one vote doesn't necessarily disagree strongly enough to be against it. Consensus is what comes out of committee.
Well, and the
And when it
time
goes-
frame the time frame to get this onto the budget would put it into March, correct, Teresa? For next year's budget.
Well, if we're just doing what we're doing, there really isn't any changes for that, right? So,
Other than the nutritional services component.
right.
So, but
Right.
if it all gets approved in March, you still have plenty of time to make that adjustment for fiscal year 21-22, right?
Well, 21, 22, I'm building it as of the practice, not as of the way that the articles were written, which is why I kind of brought that up at the meeting, because there was going to need to be a change if that's, if the wording was going to stay the same, we were going to need to look at it differently.
So Jim, when you, at the next JOC meeting, when we go through and have the committee reports, can you attach this document under Articles of Agreement Committee in board docs, and then everyone will be able to access it through board docs as well as in their email. And then the public it can be made public, and the public should be able to access it that way too. And then, we can just give a summary of those. I think it was two changes that were made here, and then send it out to the districts after that meeting.
That's the way I would like to see it done, where the committee reports out on what the recommendations are. And then as an item on the agenda, any action that the committee recommends is voted on by the JOC, by the full group.
And with Jim Hallowell's blessing, hopefully it sails right through Palisades board
I
meeting.
don't think that's, okay, go ahead.
I'm quoting you on that, Jim. I got this videotape now.
This is recorded, isn't it? Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Or on tape, so to speak. All right.
I think we have your granddaughter as a witness too. I think she was
Well,
still there for
I'm
that.
not quite understood. She can't vote yet.
Not yet, but you know, you got to loop in that next generation, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're good. Everybody, business administrators, everybody's okay with, can sign off on this. Everybody's okay with this, the changes proposed?
And Zach, is this something we can bring up at the finance meeting on Thursday, even before it goes through the JOC, even though it's not being voted on by the JOC, or maybe not?
Yeah, we can add this to our agenda.
Okay.
All right.
All right, sounds good then. Everybody have a good night and enjoy the snow.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Yeah, see ya.
Hey, David, did you? Oh, just missed him. All right. Well, I think his normal email should be good for the thing.
Yeah, I sent him a text that told him he could start using the JOC thing.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if he wanted a different, like an email group, so then that way multiple people from their organization can get it. But for right now, I just have only David Kahn's.
It should just be him, but
Okay.
you're recording, Dennis.
All right. Yep.